In this episode, we're going to focus on the skill that turns Git from a neat history viewer into a real safety net, knowing how to undo work without making the situation worse. Every administrator eventually has a moment where they made a change too quickly, changed the wrong file, mixed unrelated changes together, or realized the approach was wrong halfway through. The stressful part is not making the mistake, because mistakes are normal, but feeling unsure whether you can get back to a known good state cleanly. Git's recovery features are designed for exactly that, but beginners often avoid them because the words sound destructive, especially reset. The goal here is to build a calm, safe way of thinking about undo operations, where you can choose the right tool for the job and understand what will happen before you do it. When you think this way, Git stops feeling like a fragile system you might break and starts feeling like a reliable set of guardrails. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A safe starting point is to separate 3 different kinds of change you might want to undo. Changes you have not committed yet, changes you have committed locally but not shared, and changes that have already been shared with others. These categories matter because Git's undo tools behave differently depending on where the change lives. Uncommitted changes live in your working area, committed changes live in history, and shared changes also exist in other people's histories. A calm undo mindset begins by identifying which category you are in, because that tells you how much risk there is in rewriting history. If the change is only in your working directory, undoing it is generally low risk because you are not changing history, just your current files. If the change is already in shared history, undoing it should be done in a way that preserves shared consistency, which usually means adding new commits that reverse previous ones rather than rewriting the past. You do not need to become an expert overnight, but you do need the habit of asking, where does this change live? Now we can talk about stash, because it solves a common beginner problem. You have work in progress, but you need to switch context quickly. Maybe you started editing a script and then realized you need to check a different branch, or you need to pull a teammate's update, or you need to address an urgent bug. You do not want to commit your half-finished work just to save it, but you also do not want to lose it. Stash is designed for this exact situation because it lets you temporarily set aside your current uncommitted changes so your working area becomes clean. The important mental model is that stashing is like putting your current edits into a labeled drawer and clearing your desk. Your work is not gone. It is just stored away so you can focus on something else without mixing changes. Stash is powerful, but the safe way to use it begins with understanding what it is and what it is not. It is not a substitute for committing, because stashes are not as visible or as well described as commits, and they can become confusing if you accumulate many of them. It is also not a backup strategy, because a stash is meant to be temporary, and if you forget about it, you might lose track of what it contained and why. The best pattern is to use stash to pause work briefly, then come back, apply the stash, and either finish the work or decide to discard it. This creates a clean rhythm, stash to switch context, then resolve the stash sooner rather than later. For admins, this is especially helpful when you are interrupted by an operational issue. You can park your current work safely and return to it after the urgent task is handled, without committing incomplete changes into history. Reset is the word that scares beginners, and it should be treated with respect, but it should not be treated like a forbidden spell. The core idea of reset is that it moves the current branch pointer to a different commit, effectively changing what Git considers to be the tip of your branch. Depending on how it is used, it can also change what is staged and what is in your working directory. That is why it can feel destructive. It can rewrite the view of history for your branch and potentially discard work that is not recorded elsewhere. The safe mindset is to use reset only when you understand whether you are moving history, changing staging, changing your working files, or some combination of these. For beginners, the main conceptual use is to back up from a bad local commit or to unstage changes that you staged by accident, without changing the content of your working files. When you understand that reset can target different areas, it becomes a precise tool rather than a blunt one. A helpful way to reduce fear is to think of Git as having 3 layers you care about: your working files, the staging area, and the commit history. Most everyday confusion comes from mixing up which layer is being affected by an action. Stash mostly targets the working and staging layers, putting current changes aside. Reset can affect the history pointer, and it can also affect staging and working files depending on how it is used. If you always ask yourself, which layer am I trying to change, you can choose an undo tool that is appropriate and avoid surprises. This also explains why people have different stories about reset, because they may have used it in different ways and experienced different outcomes. For a beginner administrator, the key is not to memorize variations, but to remember that reset is about moving the branch pointer and optionally changing what is staged and what is in the working directory. That single mental model makes the tool feel understandable rather than scary. Tags are another recovery skill that beginners underestimate because they feel like a feature for releases and big projects. In reality, tags are useful whenever you want to mark a specific commit as important so you can return to it easily. Think of a tag as a permanent bookmark in your history. Unlike a branch, which moves forward as you commit, a tag usually stays attached to one commit and does not move. For admin work, tags can mark moments like known good baseline, pre-migration state, or post-fix checkpoint. When you use tags thoughtfully, you create stable anchors in history that make recovery easier because you do not have to remember commit identifiers or search through log in a hurry. In stressful situations, a stable label that points to a trusted state is a huge advantage. Tags also help teams coordinate by giving everyone the same reference point, reducing the chance that two people think they are discussing the same version but are not. Safe undo thinking also includes the habit of choosing reversibility whenever possible. Some undo actions rewrite history, while others create new history that reverses old changes. Rewriting can be fine in private work that no one else depends on, but it becomes dangerous when you have already shared commits. The reason is not that Git will explode, but that rewriting makes your history diverge from other people's history, creating confusion and forcing extra reconciliation work. In admin environments, that confusion can waste time during incidents. So a healthy default is to treat shared history as append only, meaning you fix mistakes by adding new commits that correct them rather than by pretending the mistake never happened. This approach creates a truthful history that is easier to audit and easier to learn from. It also improves trust because teammates can see what happened and why it was corrected, instead of encountering a rewritten history that makes it hard to follow the chain of events. Another part of safe undo thinking is being honest with yourself about what you are trying to achieve. Sometimes you want to throw away experimental work because it went nowhere, and that is fine, but you should be sure it is truly safe to discard. Other times you want to preserve the work, but change how it is recorded, such as combining commits or moving changes to a different branch. In those cases, it is better to use tools that preserve your work while adjusting structure, rather than using something destructive out of impatience. Git's recovery features are powerful because they separate these goals. Stash preserves work temporarily. Tags preserve a reference point permanently. Reset can move your pointer and reshape your local branch when that is appropriate. The better you get at naming your goal, the easier it becomes to pick a tool confidently. This is why experienced users seem calm around Git recovery, because they are not guessing, they are matching a tool to an intent. It is also useful to understand that recovery is easier when your everyday workflow is healthy. Small commits with clear messages are easier to undo than one giant commit that mixes unrelated changes. Short-lived branches are easier to manage than long branches that drift far from main. Frequent diff reviews reduce the chance of accidental changes, which reduces the need for dramatic recovery. Tags at important milestones give you known points to return to. In other words, recovery is not a separate activity from normal work. It is the continuation of normal habits under pressure. If you build your daily workflow around clarity and small steps, recovery becomes routine instead of frightening. This is especially true for Linux administrators, because operational work is often interrupted, and Git gives you a safe way to pause, pivot, and resume without losing your place. To tie everything together, a calm recovery approach with Git is built on knowing what you can safely change and what you should treat as stable. Stash is a temporary parking space for uncommitted work when you need to switch tasks quickly. Reset is a pointer-moving tool that can be safe when you use it intentionally, especially for local, unshared history and for staging corrections. Tags are permanent bookmarks that let you mark known good or important moments so you can return to them without stress. Underneath all of this is safe undo thinking. Identify where the change lives, choose reversibility when the change is shared, and prefer clear, small units of work so undo operations stay precise. When you adopt this mindset, you do not have to fear mistakes because you have reliable ways to recover without creating new confusion. That confidence is exactly what makes Git a practical admin tool rather than a source of anxiety.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.